From the timing of Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal's arrest to the gap between the initiation of proceedings and the subsequent arrest, the Supreme Court has raised 5 important and tough questions before the Enforcement Directorate while hearing Kejriwal's petition against his arrest in the Delhi excise policy case. So in this video, I, Apoorva Mandhani, will tell you what these 5 questions are. Now, we know that Kejriwal was arrested in the Delhi excise policy case on 21st of March. This was days after the 2024 Lok Sabha election schedule was announced. The Delhi High Court had rejected the plea against his arrest while holding that the ED possesses adequate evidence to suggest Kejriwal's involvement in money laundering relating to the excise policy case. He had then approached the Supreme Court in less than 24 hours on 10th of April. Now a Supreme Court bench comprising Justices Sanjeev Khanna and Dipankar Datta is hearing his plea, and during the hearing earlier this week, Senior Counsel Abhishek Manu Singhvi, who was appearing for Kejriwal, made several arguments questioning Kejriwal's arrest for about 2 hours. The court then posed some tough questions to Additional Solicitor General S.V. Raju, who represented the ED, on the basis of Singhvi's arguments. In total, the court asked 5 important questions to the ED in this case, as I mentioned. Now, first, the court has questioned ED over the timing of Kejriwal's arrest right before the general elections. Justice Khanna, in fact, told ASG S.V. Raju, and I quote, "Liberty is very exceedingly important. You cannot deny that," before questioning ED over the timing. Apart from this, secondly, the court also raised questions over the time gap between the initiation of proceedings in the case and arrest. It cited the provisions of Section 8 of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, or PMLA, which imposes an upper limit of 365 days on the completion of an investigation. Third, the court also asked whether criminal proceedings can be initiated against Kejriwal in terms of what was held in the 2022 Supreme Court ruling in the Vijay Madan Lal Chaudhary case. Now, I won't go into detail in this 2022 ruling, but essentially in this case, the Supreme Court had upheld key provisions of PMLA and had spoken extensively about attachment of property. Essentially, this question now came up because the court has asked the ED to clarify how it initiated criminal proceedings against Kejriwal without adjudicatory proceedings, which entails the attachment of unlawfully gained movable or immovable property under PMLA. The court said that there are no proceedings of attachment, which is essentially seizing of unlawful property in this case so far. If there are, then the ED, it said, needs to show how Kejriwal was linked to this property. Attachment of property, just for some context, is an important aspect of the proceedings under PMLA, especially when the proceedings are pending, because PMLA case is filed to probe allegations of money laundering of proceeds of crime. So this is why attachment of that property which is allegedly involved in such a case becomes important when the case is pending. The fourth question that the Supreme Court has posed before ED relates to the judgment in Manish Sisodia's case. The Supreme Court had last year refused to grant bail to former Delhi Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia, who is facing money laundering and corruption charges again in the same case. The Supreme Court had then noted that the CBI and ED's allegations in the case, the court had taken note of these allegations, but at the same time held that detention or jail before being pronounced guilty of an offence should not become punishment without trial, and that if the trial gets prolonged, the prayer for bail may be meritorious. So the Supreme Court, while hearing Kejriwal's case now, has asserted that there are 2 parts in Sisodia's judgment, one in favour of the accused and the other against the accused. So the court has now sought clarification from the ED as to which part Kejriwal's case falls under. Fifth and finally, the court asked how Section 19 of PMLA is to be interpreted. Again, for some context, Section 19 gives ED powers, in fact wide powers, to arrest if there is reason to believe that there is an offence committed. Section 45, on the other hand, deals with bail. Now, Section 45 requires the court to be satisfied that there are reasonable grounds to believe an accused is not guilty before he or she can be released on bail. Kejriwal in this case has approached the court against arrest and remand instead of applying for bail under Section 45. So the court explained that the threshold under Section 19 casts onus on the prosecution, which is fairly high, but the threshold under Section 45 places the onus on the accused instead to show absence of guilt for being released on bail. So essentially the court wants to know how these provisions need to be interpreted now that Kejriwal has approached the court challenging his arrest instead of applying for bail before the Supreme Court at this moment. Essentially, the Supreme Court wants the ED to respond to these 5 questions while hearing Kejriwal's plea against his arrest in the case, and the court has now fixed the hearing for 3rd May, that is this Friday, and we are of course going to keep track of the proceedings and keep bringing you all the latest updates. Thank you so much for watching.